Welcome back to it, guys, the Friday edition of the Now Morning Show, where we are talking careers. And while we may have explored some lesser known, there is one that we've heard the term, and we're not quite sure what it means, some of us. So joining us this morning to explain the ins and outs of occupational therapy, we are joined by Priya Gomes. Good morning, Priya, and welcome to the Now Morning Show.
Good morning, Ainka, and thank you so much for having me on the program this morning.
A pleasure. Now, Priya and I have jumped up in the band carnival time. We fed together, but I never really knew what you do. So,
well,
if you were
that
to
would
describe...
include you and all of Trinidad.
Oh boy. Then tell us, what exactly does an occupational therapist do?
Yes. So basically, an occupational therapist is a healthcare professional.
Mm-hmm.
Everything you do on a day-to-day basis is considered your occupation. So that is usually broken down into 3 categories: activities of daily living, example, bathing, dressing, making a meal.
Okay.
Then your work activities, what you do for an earning, and leisure activities, whether it's swimming, gardening, going to the movies. So if you have any injury or illness that is preventing you from participating in your occupations, that's where we come in. So we work with, the whole age spectrum. So with premature babies all the way to hospice care.
Wow.
In, various environments at hospitals, schools, outpatient clinics. We can work with private contractors to maybe design buildings that are accessible.
Oh, wow.
So it's a really broad field, and unfortunately we only have maybe about 24 licensed and registered occupational therapists in Trinidad and Tobago.
Really?
With maybe only 3 in the public system.
Wow, that deficit is incredible considering how wide-ranging the job actually is. When you talk about consulting with private contractors in terms of the construction of buildings even, that seems like it should be far more, or like a greater number of persons involved in that process than there is.
Right. So, I mean, definitely in 2021, where we should be looking at making buildings and, procedures inclusive, accessible to everyone, we need to start developing and working in a collaborative, multidisciplinary team to make sure that moving forward, any building being built right now should be accessible. And we're not just talking about sticking a handicap sticker on a bathroom door when it's not functional for persons who may need access to those types of facilities.
Makes sense. Now, that means the level of expertise and academics might be a bit higher than one might expect previously. Tell me a little bit about what is needed academically and perhaps in terms of the training as well, since it's so wide-ranging.
Right. So in the UK, you can get a bachelor's degree in occupational therapy. In the States, it's basically a master's degree entry-level program.
Wow. And
maybe about 3 years ago, the University of Southern Caribbean started a master's degree in occupational therapy locally.
Okay.
So, Trinidad and Tobagonians and the wider diaspora Caribbean, they would have access to a master's entry-level program right here in Trinidad and Tobago at the University of Southern Caribbean. So basically, it's to me the perfect marriage of science and creativity, because no 2 patients are ever the same. I mean, you could have 2 patients with the exact same injuries, but because your occupations are going to be different, we have to look at it very client-centered, and we tailor a program specific to that client, their injury, the environment, and the things that they are needed and expected and want to do.
Right, makes sense. Now, you're saying we, because of course, as you said, it's a small pool of persons specifically in Trinidad, but statistically speaking, the globe is seeing an upsurge in the interest in this sort of job too. So I'm wondering if in your selection, was it something that you from jump knew that you wanted to do or happened upon? How did it happen for you to end up in occupational therapy?
Yes, so definitely didn't know about occupational therapy before I went away to university. I knew I wanted to be in some type of helping profession. And when I started university, I was kind of exposed to physical therapy, nursing, psychology, and occupational therapy. And, I kind of realized, well, I had a grandmother at the time who had Alzheimer's. And I just remember thinking there's more that we could be doing for, but, with only a few therapists back then, like 20 years ago, those options as to the best care for her were very limited. And so once I got into the program and realized that it was really about, improving the person's quality of life, because not everybody recovers 100%.
Right.
But it doesn't mean that you need to recover 100% to be able to do your occupations or to be able to enjoy a certain quality of life. So some of the basic things that we take for granted, just like even maybe, brushing your teeth or bathing by yourself, not everybody wants a caregiver or family member helping them with certain activities.
Right.
And so my goal as an occupational therapist, especially working with the adult geriatric population, is to try and get that client to be able to be as independent as possible within their limitations. So safety, but trying to improve their quality of life.
Love that. I mean, we as able-bodied persons are constantly trying to improve our quality of life. It's so top of mind for me that it's really relieving to hear that emphasis being placed there. But I'm also hearing a bit of consultation being a part of the job as well, because with your experience with the lack of persons in the field, you have a unique opportunity to bestow a lot of information on persons. So Priya, how do we get in touch with you if we wanted to know more or even hire you?
Right. So, well, I'm also the director of Prehab Services Limited, which is preventative and rehabilitative therapy services. And you can reach me at prehabservices@gmail.com or 723-7370. So I also see clients in their home setting. So maybe they're at a lower level and can't make it to my office. So I will come home and do an evaluation with them in their environment and suggest or recommend modifications to the home. So whether it's moving things around, advising on a piece of adaptive equipment, whether it's a shower chair, maybe a bedside commode over the toilet so they don't have to go as low. Maybe it's just rearranging items they use often in the kitchen so that they're not bending down or having to use a step stool to reach something high. So it's really about looking at the client, what their needs are, and then coming up with a plan together. I mean, ideally, we should be working in a multidisciplinary team, which would include, doctors, physical therapists, speech language pathologists, psychologists, anybody that would be pertinent to that specific client's best care.
Right.
And we don't always get that because we kind of work in little pockets because so many of us work privately as well.
Well, at the very least, I hope that this means in the near future we will see that dream team coming together. Now that people are more aware of the opportunities within the field, the process, the details thereof. And in the case of the pandemic, we may see a lot of people coming out with that need. We know that COVID is going to linger a bit in some persons who actually are infected, and generally the pandemic has changed the way we function. So how has that affected your functionality and your ability to do those site visits and even just work?
Well, I mean, out of obviously safety and concern, I did close the office momentarily.
Right.
And then I took the necessary precautions to be able to start back and see my home clients and to have clients come into the office. So, following your PPE, sanitize, wash hands, etc. And with my line of work, working virtually has been a little challenging because many of my clients are elderly clients, 80 and over, and may not have access to a computer or may need physical assistance to follow through with some of the exercises in the program. So you also need that buy-in from caregivers or the family members to be able to assist there, right? But as you said, with this pandemic, we are going to see an increase in certain types of injuries, especially repetitive strain injuries. Everybody's, on the computer working from home, online schooling. So you're going to see a lot of, carpal tunnel injuries, trigger fingers, CMC joint injuries, because they're on the computer. So what I have done as well, I have consulted with a couple of schools, and their teachers, just talking about repetitive strain injuries, how they can set up their home office to be more ergonomically, adequate to try to prevent any of those repetitive strain injuries. And, I take any opportunity to talk about occupational therapy and just to share information, because a lot of times it's just a lack of information.
Beautiful. I like how you take in front. Talk to the teachers, get the next generation all set. And who knows, next career day, because this is what this is, we're going to have you in studio showing us some of those techniques and more. Thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Thank you so much for having me.
Always a pleasure. And of course, that's how we're going to wrap things up for this interview. But stick around, guys. We still have much more information here on the Now Morning Show. We'll be back.